Welcome to the special meeting of the Board of Supervisors and the City Councils of both of our cities. And we'd like to begin this morning with a moment of silence by turning off your cell phones to begin with. And secondly, would everyone stand for a moment to honor those that passed in the Paradise Fire, and they're still going through looking at the debris. Thank you. Would you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag? I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we'll have a welcome introduction by Will Scott. Welcome.
Thank you all for being here, and we'll start with a roll call and introduction. Start over here on the left with our city council members from Clear Lake, Russ Greenberg, Nick Bennett, Bruce Sabatier, and Joyce Overton. Thank you very much. Thank you for your role in making this whole process possible. For the Board of Supervisors, we have Rob Brown, Tina Scott, Jim Steele, Jeff Smith, and Moke Simon. And thank you also to the full board for being here. For the Lakeport City Council, we have all the members present: Kenny Parlett, Maria Turner, George Spur, Stacy Mattina, and Tim Barnes. The county and the two cities have been responsible, along with the Workforce Alliance of the North Bay, for funding this development of an economic development strategy. So we are very pleased to have had this collaboration through the Economic Development Corporation. Among our guests here today, representing Kim Van, who is the State Director for USDA Rural Development, is Ron Tackett. Ron is the USDA Single Family Housing Program Director. Ron, if you'd like to just say a few words about the importance of this process.
Yes, I just wanted to make a couple comments on economic development in Lake County. My boss, Kim Van, and myself came to Lake County early in the spring and met with the Board of Supervisors, trying to figure out from their perspective what's really important. And because we have over 40 loan and grant programs that we want to help folks with. And we've been working the last 4 months, 5 months doing that and meeting with folks. And the importance of housing in Lake County really came up as an important issue. So far this year, we've held 4 housing fairs trying to assist people with affordable housing. And we're looking to work on 2 new multifamily developments, one in Kelseyville, one in Lakeport. So I've been here, I was here Friday, and then I learned my boss was called in to DC, so she asked me to come back today for a meeting. And there was a lady I met with Friday, she asked me, "Did you stay here the weekend?" And I said, "No, I had to drive in from Chico." But we have a commitment to Lake County, and we look forward to working with folks in Lake County and all their economic development issues. So look forward to the meeting and the comments here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you for all of the work and the support that USDA Rural Development in California has been providing to Lake County. From the Workforce Alliance of the North Bay, we have Stacy Kaiko, who is the Business Engagement Representative.
Thank you, Wilbur. So, good morning. My name is Stacy Kaiko, and I'm the Business Engagement Representative for the Workforce Alliance of the North Bay. My supervisor, Bruce Wilson, unfortunately was unable to be here today. He has jury duty, so he's doing his civic duty. But he wanted me to convey that the Alliance has been really excited to be a part of this process, and we are really looking forward to the momentum continuing and seeing how we can assist improving the economic development in Lake County. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Stacy. Would the members of the Lake County Economic Development Corporation Board of Directors please stand? And our staff, we have Andy Lucas, Jeff Lucas, and Deborah Schwartz. We've been working very diligently on bringing this process to this point in its presentation to the community. So thank you all for that support as well. And the administrators from each of the jurisdictions, Carol Hutchinson from the County of Lake, Marcus O'Hara, City Manager of Lakeport, and Greg Folsom, City Manager of Clear Lake, have been instrumental to this, and again, they're all three on the Board of Directors of the EDC as well. I'm going to introduce Dr. Robert Eiler. He'll give his presentation, and at the conclusion of it, we have the opportunity for questions and answers. We're going to try and limit it to about 3 minutes because we know that there will be quite a few questions, and we know that he will have some very good answers for us. So Rob Eiler is President and Head of Research at Economic Forensics and Analytics. He is Dean of the School of Extended and International Education at Sonoma State University, Professor of Economics and Director of the Center for Regional Economic Analysis at Sonoma State, where he has been teaching since 1995. He earned a PhD from the University of California, Davis, and earned a BA in Economics at CSU Chico. So we are very delighted, very honored, and are very much looking forward to Dr. Eiler's presentation.
Thank you, Willa. Good morning, folks. Can everybody hear me? Okay, great. Thank you. So, folks, my task this morning is to kind of walk you through what we've done for the last 6 or so months in trying to develop a strategy for Lake County going forward. I want to have some thanks just to get started. I want to thank the Workforce Alliance of the North Bay, County of Lake, the supervisors, Lake County EDC and staff have been amazing help, and also the Project Task Force. How many folks from here were on the task force? Can you just raise your hand with me at different times? Some of y'all weren't able to come to all of them, but I thank you again for your time on that. And I have some specific thanks to give. I know Monica Rosenthal's not here today, but she really is someone who was a spark behind a lot of this. I gave a speech almost 3 years ago today up here at Twin Pine Casino, and Monica kept in touch with me throughout this process, and then we actually got this thing done this year. Andy Luke's been a great help. Thank you, Andy, wherever you're roaming around. Wilda, again, thank you. You were great on the editing and just sort of, keeping everybody in check. Michelle, thank you for keeping the county perspective in there and working with me on a lot of the details. And Bruce Wilson, who's not here today, as Stacy said earlier, but Bruce has been a big help throughout this as well. Okay, so for those of you who are not familiar with this process to date, what I'm going to do is I'm going to slowly walk you through the process we went through, the things we discovered, or the things I felt like that were the germane issues going forward, and then think about the next steps. These were the questions we tried to answer. What businesses will actually come, stay, and grow in Lake County? And rural California has a different challenge than, let's say, suburban or urban California in terms of answering those questions. So we wanted to use that lens where Lake County was the specific place of the test in that. What type of people will these businesses employ? So if you are able to attract and grow specific types of businesses, what's the workforce needs? Who do you have to train to get ready to work in those businesses, if at all? How is the government going to help or be a partner in those evolutions? And then finally, what infrastructure investments do you need to make? So every time we got together as a task force, and all the times I thought about what was going to happen at the final end of this process and project, these are the things I was thinking about in terms of the 4 major questions to ask. And I have 2 big questions going forward, as you'll see at the very end. So here's basically the path in terms of the punchline. When I'm gone and this project takes on another form, one of the things that I like to leave is sort of a path to walk on. So the first step is a setup path. And thinking about the financial partnerships you need to make, thinking about the tourism partnerships you need to make, because if tourism is going to be a thing going forward in Lake County, there's actual regional partners and other intra-county partners you need to make. And then finally, thinking about wireless and broadband. So you're going to see that theme come up a lot here today, and I know that y'all have been slowly walking in some ways toward bits and pieces of broadband and wireless throughout the county. But if you're actually going to go through and attract a 21st century business, it's something you have to think about, not just specific sort of spots of wireless and broadband, but more general outcomes. So I feel like that's something in terms of setup you're going to have to watch very closely. Another big thing is messaging. So when you're walking forward, the messaging about Lake County and each city in Lake County and each part of Lake County, having a consistent county-wide message around all that. So I've heard as I've gone around and I've been to all parts of Lake County over the last 7 months, and I've had family that have lived in Lake County. I have former wives that have lived in Lake County. Bottom line is that there's messaging about Lake County it's important, and this is also a big thing about rural California, is because there's fewer people than in a suburban or urban environment. Everybody kind of knows each other, either directly, indirectly, or maybe 3 or 4 concentric circles around your home. Basically, everybody knows everybody. So you start talking to each other, and there can be a negative feedback loop, but there can also be a positive feedback loop. So shaping that messaging is absolutely critical going forward. And that's especially true when you start contacting what I'm going to call clients later. The more and more you go out and try to grab onto businesses and even workers and try to attract them to come to Lake County and work in Lake County, you have to have a positive message about that. Now granted, there's obviously the last 4 years have been very tricky because the fires have thrown a curveball in sort of consistent messaging where you're in command of it. But I'll come back to that in a little bit. The other piece is just preparing for growth. How do you message that this place is ready for what you're actually laying a path to do, not now, but 5 years from now? And having that messaging consistent, daily, looking forward all the time is a big thing going forward. The next thing is thinking about workforce and infrastructure and making investments. So 2 things that you'll see here is that you need curriculum, but really it's about lab space. And I say lab space in quotes, or I thought I did. But I think about it in quotes because lab space is not just science. It can also be a laboratory of trying out new businesses, trying out different ways of doing business, of working, and ultimately also having hotel space. And when I say hotel space, I did put that in quotes. When I say hotel space, I just don't mean hotels for the sake of hotels. I mean places where people can come and work seasonally or for some length of time and then have another type of business rotate in. And you'll see that later when we talk about the science aspect that can happen with the lake and some of the things we're targeting in terms of industries. But that path is what happens in terms of going forward and having an economic development strategy, is walking on those stones, if you will, to a better tomorrow. And then once that happens in one way, you want to go back and start over again, or at least check back in and have kind of an annual assessment. In other words, don't just start on the path and then forget it ever happened. And 5 years go by and you say, oh, I wonder what happened to that thing. And you say, well, there goes another report on the shelf. The point of this path is that it will keep what I've done and what we've all done as partners in this from staying on the shelf. Because you'll annually assess what's the progress against what the goals were that we stated. And then there's some evolution in that every year. And then you start back on that path again as you need it. And then it becomes a more positive cycle. And that's key. And folks, just as another thing before we get deep into the details, I've done 3 or 4 of these projects around rural California, and rural California generally has a lot of the same issues, and we'll see that come up later. It's really a matter of saying, how are you different? What are you going to tell other people, especially outside of Lake County, that's an attractive thing to bring them here and want them to stay in property? Okay, so one of the biggest concerns in this project was, what would we say in the data, or just from what Lake County can support, we would say should be targeted as new industries, or even the growth of industries, as we'll see in a minute. Some of these are already here. The first one is actually thinking about science and using the lake or the recent disasters as a way of stimulating economic growth. In other words, turning a negative into a positive or a challenge into an opportunity. One thing you can do is actually look at the lake as an experimental ground all by itself. UC Santa Barbara, for example, has the #1 lake science program in the world. Why not engage professors who are there and bring them here to do science and then have these concentric circles of growth happen in jobs around that, because it's coming every year in a cyclic way. That's one of the things we're saying, is that let's look at ways of actually attracting science, and I'll get back to why in just a second. The agricultural supply chain, thinking about, you have agriculture here, Are there different nodes of the supply chain, meaning distribution, manufacturing, and retail, that you can bring to Lake County, or maybe center in Lake County with other community partners and other state partners to just link up those pieces? Why is that important? It's important for one big reason. The more you can vertically integrate an industry, the more you capture the dollars generated by that industry. When you just have one part of the supply chain and you don't have two or three, you can lose and have what you would call leakages in economics out to other places. So if you can capture some of that, especially if it's going to happen near here anyway, it's a good thing to do. One thing that does stimulate in terms of questions is the role of cannabis in the next stages of agriculture throughout California. And it's been a funny evolution, and we're not going to go too deep into that today, so if you wanted to see a lot on cannabis, it ain't going to happen here today, because we got other things to talk about. But it's one of many possibilities looking forward, because it's basically an agricultural product, one way or the other, whether you see it in the legal sense or the illegal sense. Now thinking about that as one, like I said, of the myriad possibilities is out there. One thing about Lake County, we'll come back to this later, is the quality of life. There are a lot of people who espouse the quality of life in Lake County as differential from other places. Well, is it possible to attract people to live here that are bringing businesses with them? In other words, don't look for the large employer, but look for smaller employers who may operate out of their houses initially or out of a larger parcel that they basically are the owner of, and then see if they can't attract some jobs. One of the biggest examples I've used, when we've been talking since, actually since 2015 on this, is the city of Healdsburg kind of got a serendipitous boost in aerospace. Why? Because 5 or 6 engineers from General Dynamics moved to Healdsburg and started doing gig-style contract business in aerospace, and before they knew it, they had 100 employees. Okay? Healdsburg, California, doing rockets, right? How does that happen? It happens because the people that were attracted there found themselves in a so-called cluster and started to feed off each other, and they had a global business model, not just local. They didn't go there and open a candle shop. They went there and they started to design airplanes and rockets. Okay? That ended up feeding other businesses, but the point is they actually created jobs basically on their homes. That's a possibility in a place like Lake County, because again, it's a quality of life issue. They moved to Healdsburg in their mind for quality of life. They ended up generating a scientific business out of it. So that's something that Lake County can kind of sell. If you think you can sell the quality of life, then you should be able to also sell the quality of doing specific types of businesses where the quality of life is a key decision node for someone to actually move and have a business here. And then finally, which is classic, is tourism or visitor support. So Lake County does not want to lose the tourism business, but it's really more about enhancing it in a way that's a little bit more sustainable and perhaps a little less seasonal. And there's a real trick in that. It's not easy to do that. And I don't have a panacea for the problems in tourism in Lake County, nor a perfect path forward. But just thinking about packaging and messaging at another level makes you more competitive against the regional marketplace that in the last 10 years, looking at just Napa and Sonoma County alone, has become way more competitive. You just can't sit on your laurels. You got to start thinking in the same way. And how are you going to drive people here and then try to capture as much of their spending once they're here as possible? How do we filter those? How do we come up with those 4? Well, generally when you do analysis about targeting industries, every place is a little bit different. So the first one is think about what types of businesses would actually look outside Lake County initially for marketplace. Doesn't mean it would abandon the marketplace here, but which ones would actually derive their income primarily from places beyond Lake County? Why is that critical? Because then you're not just subservient to what happens locally in terms of driving your business. And that those dollars, when they come in, they circulate. So a lot of countries like exports because you generate income from somewhere beyond. And when you do economic development analysis, it's almost doing like micro-international analysis, thinking that you're this little country, and how do you drive business towards you from outside to enhance what you have inside economically without having to generate it from the inside. So that export focus is key. And if you notice, going back real quick, all 4 of those have some external component to them. The next one is trying to increase economic mobility, and the idea that you're actually hiring or generating business that has higher than average wages and trying to pick everybody up. So one of the biggest questions in the last, let's say 7 or 8 years, specifically after the recession ended, was what was going to happen to wages and, in a sense, income distributions in the wake of the recession. And a lot of rural California has seen the so-called distribution of wages, or the lowest wages to the highest wages, stay relatively stagnant. Where urban California has seen them move to the right. In other words, they're all moving up towards higher wages or better so-called economic mobility, trying to get out of poverty trying a chance to own a home to generate more wealth. Those types of businesses can do that. Again, why? Because they're export focused and have higher than average wages. Also, the other thing, and this is also critical, how many people here have thought about, wow, why doesn't Lake County actually try to get Google to come here? Has anybody ever had that fleeting thought? Come on now, thank you for a minute. So a lot of rural and suburban California started to see this, or think of this belief, well, you know, the Bay Area is going to suddenly outgrow itself, and at some point the ROI of staying in the Bay Area was going to pop, and these folks were going to leave. So why not just go 70, 80 miles north and come here? Look at the quality of life, right? And that theme's going to keep coming back up, so hold on to that too. But why not just move here? The calculus of moving a high-tech business to a rural place is very, very tough on the decision to actually move to that rural place. Right? If you've been watching the news about Amazon's decision making, they ended up in kind of a rural-ish place as far as that eastern seaboard goes, but they're very close to DC in the end. They're in places that there's logistics, that all the things that they need are there, right? How do you sell that? So you got to think about, okay, well, if you can't sell that easily because you're not that big and you're not that diverse for a different audience, you need to try to utilize what you have. So that's the key. So as a foundation, to get the thing started, didn't want to walk too far outside the box. The lake and what's been happening recently as science. Tourism, we already have that. Agriculture, already have that. People that move here because of quality of life, they may have a business, kind of already have that. But that gets the wheel spinning, and that's the key, is to utilize Lake County and what you already have, rather than try to think about what you might be able to do, but then 5 years will elapse and you say, wow, we had all these other good assets, we never utilized them. Biggest theme probably at the end of the day, what makes you different? You don't see a lot of that stuff otherwise. You don't see a lot of rural California immediately go to the agricultural supply chain and try to expand that. Or try to attract specific types of science that feed off the assets or potential challenges that you want to turn into opportunities locally. Those things really don't come up. What a lot of people do is they kind of figure, well, we'll just kind of grow what we have and keep on trucking. Rather than thinking a little bit outside the box with how you can utilize those assets, and you have to be different. How is Lake County different than Colusa? Don't answer that yet. But those are the kind of things you got to be thinking about. Colusa, Tehama, Mendocino County. How are you different? Because at some point, those counties are going to be asking the same exact questions y'all are and trying to do exactly the same thing, more or less, because they're facing the exact same challenges in some cases. Okay, so that's the targeted industries piece. Now let's talk about infrastructure. So in the short term, the supposition is that there will be some pretty vehement discussion about broadband and wireless and its expansion. That's necessary. The hotel space and thinking about commercial space and what industries should be targeted, I'll come back to this later. But the utilization of commercial space is a big deal, right? Two things on that. One is that, I'm going to say this later in a little more detail, but you want to look at commercial sites specifically to the target industries. So you probably get a lot of attraction in certain ways, mainly retail, and sometimes lower end retail. Why? Because the decision process, the 4 or 5 boxes to tick for some of those, are very straightforward for Lake County. Let's put a Dollar General here. Let's put a 99-cent store here. Let's put another small grocery store here. Why? Because there's a little bit more population and it seems like, okay, now we can tip it over. Why would a company come here and take on commercial real estate? You have to be able to sell it to them as much as they want to sell it to you. And so that kind of partnership, that's the next step. So thinking about that commercial space for targeted industries only, you're making a commitment to specific types of industries, have your spaces commit to the same thing. And then hotel space is another big deal, both in the tourism support side, but also on the business support side. Because you may have somewhat seasonal movements through here for the next couple of years. Where would they stay? So the identification of the possibilities there is another piece of commercial real estate that a lot of communities don't talk about. They say, well, I got 25 sites over here. And it's this old industrial space, or this used to be this retail, or used to be this restaurant. So why don't we just put something back in there that's the same? That might fit, but you still got to find someone who wants to be there long term. Because you don't want to go through this again 3 years from now. You got to think like they are. In other words, think like a site selector. And that's a big difference, and for some cases, in some cases, that's a big cultural evolution for a community. The other thing is water and sewer. I know that Lake County EDC just put a report together about a lot of the SEDS, or this community, or the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy targets in terms of how to spend money and enhance water, sewer, and roadways. Starting on that is good. In the long term, the airport and roadways, you definitely want to fix those. And one of the things I put in the report is the airport. folks, again, if you think about bringing in different types of businesses, those assets make you differential, but they're not overnight fixes. It'll take a little while before you get there. But having it, again, long-term, in your strategy, in your planning, when's it going to happen? Let's put it out there 3 or 4 years from now. We have to start today in trying to find the financials to make that happen. So these are what we identified basically as the infrastructure needs with some emphasis on the short term. Another big piece is workforce. Now, I'm going to say this because I think it has to be said. Folks, 10 years from now, there are jobs that we don't even know yet, right? And it's also possible that the jobs we know now will not be there in 10 years. What's really tough for an educator is I have students in my classes who I'm telling you need to get an economics degree, but I don't have a clue what they're going to do with that economics degree unless they go to graduate school 10 years from now, right? And that's usually the holy grail for most of us as professors. We want everybody to go to graduate school. We know it's not possible. But we make promises that sometimes our rear ends can't catch, right? We really struggle with this as educators. And that's true all the way through high school and up. So when we think about workforce needs, the tension there is that you have to balance between what you think is going to be there, but also the hardball reality that you're going to train some folks who are then going to have to make a career transition later. So one of the reasons, or one of the things you want to do to try to keep yourself from stumbling is to continually talk to local and regional employers. Both. Don't just talk to local. Why? Because in rural California, generally speaking, you're going to have a lot of high school graduates who are going to leave. And that's just part of the game. Okay? So you want to be able to positively train people for careers that you don't have locally. But you want to talk to local employers about how you might be able to pipeline in, especially if you see targeted industry growth. Because then that cycle will just start to spin through curricula all the way up. And staying close to them is good. In terms of the supply chain, if you do expand that supply chain, you're going to need jobs in manufacturing and distribution and packaging and processing. And that expansion, depending on what industry it's in, training workers for that is another big thing as you go forward. On the tourism side, do you have customer service programs? Do you have hospitality management programs? If you don't train those folks locally, guess what you're going to have to do if you grow? This one's actual question. You have to bring them in from the outside, and to bring them in from the outside, what do you think you're going to have to do to entice them to come in? Right, pay them a little more, right? So training local people for those kind of jobs, if you see them coming, is good. And if you see that there's actual gaps, because the employers are telling you there are gaps, listen to that. Another real bad thing and a pothole that educators get into is that, for a multitude of reasons, we don't like to adjust quickly. Right? That sounds good, thanks for telling me this, but I'm going to keep teaching the things I'm going to keep teaching and they'll figure it out. Rather than having curricula sort of shift toward what employers want. And that's attention, and that's something, again, having education, the employers, and the community members all talking as one group about that and planning, staying in touch is key. On the science side, preparing folks for potential laboratory work, coding, the computer piece of it versus just the science piece of it. If you do get some science to come here, being able to say that you can actually support that in relatively low-level jobs without those folks having to import those low-level jobs, and having lab space here is another big plus. And that's a story you get to tell. So remember, we started with setup, messaging, and then workforce and infrastructure. We just walked through all that, except for the messaging piece. But that's where the spin really happens. What are these folks going to go out and tell other people about Lake County that then it'll drive more later? And then it just becomes almost like a positive feedback loop onto itself, and you grow. And you don't have to do as much 2 or 3 years from now, because the first couple of years you make the great investment. So watching that expansion of curriculum and trying to think about the science piece is key. Okay. Now, let's talk a little bit about data. Another thing about economic development strategies is you want to sort of pinpoint specific data points that say, okay, this is how we're improving, or this is where we need more help. So we talked about this a little bit. One is in TOT growth. So transient occupancy tax is something that, especially if you have a tourism-based economy, or one in which it's a relatively large part of your economy, seeing that grow can help you think about whether your tourism strategy is actually working or not working, but it can also tell you something about the supply side. So tourism growth is something that you want to say is pure demand, and that's not true. If you have more hotel rooms, you're going to see TOT growth, even if occupancy slips a little bit, because you might have more rooms selling to visitors. So you want to watch both sides. So I didn't say TOT growth purely on the demand side, but the analysis of whether or not you're getting more rooms identified, more people paying TOT, and more people staying. You want to keep up on all those metrics inside of TOT. Sales tax growth is kind of the same thing. If you attract more sales tax paying businesses, you might get dollars growth. So you want to look at how much more you're attracting businesses, but also the number of, not the amount of dollars that are growing as well. This is a tough one because the data on the education of the workforce is a little tricky to follow, but I'm saying here that you really want to focus on the 18 to 24-year-olds. If you look at rural California, there's a metric or a picture that's called a population pyramid. And the population pyramid is kind of big on the bottom and small on top naturally. But rural California kind of looks like a top, where it's kind of small on the bottom and then kind of loses a little bit in the middle and then bows way back out because it's aging and then tops out. Why? Because you're missing that sort of 18 to 30-year-old workforce that gets educated, leaves high school, goes away, and then in some cases actually considers coming back. How many people here grew up in Lake County, left, and came back? Okay. So that's not as many as I thought there would be. How many people just never left Lake County? Okay. So that the algebra means the rest of y'all came here from some other place. But the bottom line is that when you think about that, if your strategy is working, the level of the workforce in terms of their education and what they're bringing back here, you should see some movement in the 18 to 24-year-old group. Okay? Because those younger workers are going to be attracted to that place when it's actually growing, and that should help. The other thing is in the targeted sectors, and it's a little tricky, because you can say, okay, in the professional side specifically, on the science side, you may have workers that in fact will only be tracked where they get paid. So if you bring in science that's seasonal, and that folks being paid, or those folks being paid in Missouri, but they come here for 6 months, the data will never show up in Lake County. So you want to really watch that closely, but that means you've got to keep your eyes on everything. Just don't use the government data alone. You've got to be your own tracker of the data. And you have to get a little bit more robust in that. So watch that closely. This is another one a lot of people like to fixate on commercial vacancy. Okay? Well, there are certain lots at this point that probably should remain vacant by the nature of where they are and what they are. So watching the types of businesses that come in and how if vacancy starts to drop, because you're actually getting more infill or just more growth, what's being filled and where is just as important as just that one piece of data. It's the percentage of the total. Something I kind of recommended was doing a quality of life metric. If your intention is to sell quality of life, a good thing to do is make it comparable to other places so you can actually tell a story about why, in a cold-blooded data way, you have a better quality of life than some other place, rather than just say it, we have a better quality of life. Okay? If you travel around Northern California, almost every community's got the same messaging, and I'll come back to this in a minute. So one thing to do as a metric is actually put something together that says, these are the things we're worried about in Lake County in terms of quality of life, and we want to compare that to other places to show how strong we are. The caveat, you might do that, and then you might go, uh-oh, when I actually do this comparison, we're about in the middle. I thought we'd be really close to the top. But the beautiful thing about that is, that tells you got some challenges that you can focus on and try to creep that thing up. Okay? Again, the data can tell you things that really should steer the ship more than anything else, but make sure that you're doing it right. Shouldn't be the be-all and all. Another big step that's tough is providing incentives. And a lot of communities are struggling with this and have since redevelopment ended. So the first thing you could do is do a short-term TOT holiday. So I just said maybe you want to look at TOT growth as a good thing. Okay, that's true. But there may be a way of actually saying, look, if you are doing an Airbnb and you've been kind of under the radar, you haven't been paying TOT, or you've been doing VRBO, or you've just been kind of doing it on the side. Providing that holiday says, look, we want to identify you as a place because we're doing this strategy where we're going to need more quote-unquote hotel space. If we can identify you for 1 year or maybe 18 months, we're going to give you a TOT holiday. We just want to put you on the books. And there's a business that's coming to help you. So you're going to get more revenue. You're going to be able to pay the TOT. But you don't have to pay it for the next 18 months. You just get to identify it. Then you'll get it later. But that's tricky for a lot of communities because they see the TOT as this beautiful, fungible dollar amount. All we got to do is attract another hotel. And it washes bills away. You still got to have the occupancy. So if you know that there are properties that have almost by their own accord this sort of continuous group of people coming in, but they've been sort of lying under the radar, You have a choice. You can either go hardball on them and say, well, you've been a scofflaw, and I gotta break you down now. Well, that might stop the flow. Or you can have your arms open and say, what we'd like to do is provide you an incentive to come into the ring. We're going to give you a little holiday to do that, but now you have more and more sites identified to support the other things you're trying to do. Like I said earlier, doing it like a site selector looking at commercial space. You have an opportunity zone now in Clear Lake. Looking there at what that means is also another tricky thing. The tax break may not attract anybody initially, but if you say, look, I got 5 sites that I want to provide out there on the marketplace, and I really want to focus on our targeted industries, doing it like a site selector is key. Can you provide any relief? Is there any relief you can do? Just that one little step on the margin can help. And then thinking forward a little bit. One of the things I'm recommending is that you should look at what happened before the Valley Fire as the time of the dinosaurs, that everything kind of changed after that for Lake County, right? And so what that does, I hope, is it gets you out of the trap of thinking, oh, we used to do this in 2005. We used to do this in 2001, or I used to do this in 1989, right? Great. But that might as well have been, like I said, the time of the dinosaurs. You've got to think more forward. So part of that is trying to think, well, what can I go out and find? Can I actually do bond financing in a special way? But what you can do is like what you call an IFD or an EIFD. Set up a small area in which you can actually do that where the tax incentive bonds happen. It's very tough to do that because when you have lower public revenue already, committing it to something else is a very tricky political process. The beauty of my situation is I can recommend all this and y'all got to figure out how to do it. Okay? And it's not easy. And I don't want to say it's easy, but one thing to think about is A, things have changed. The second thing to think about is that you're not alone in those changes. The landscape has become way more competitive, just in the last 3 years, much less in the last 10. Okay? So thinking about incentives and how you can actually compete. What are you going to have to do? What can you commit to that's actually new for Lake County? That might be kind of a bold step, but it's something that you might need to do for competitive sake is key. And like I said, a lot of communities struggle with this gamble, because that's what it really is. In some ways, it's a bet. We had 5 community fora in the last 4 months. We'll actually take it back from the end of June to the end of October, which is about a 4-month period. 3 big themes popped out. A lot of people concerned about infrastructure in Lake County and whether or not it's going to support businesses and residents long term. There were concerns over the fires repeating annually and becoming a real problem for residents, and they're wanting to stick around. And finally, residents concerned over whether or not, if you invoke a strategy that potentially changes the nature of Lake County, is that going to change the reason I moved here? Will quality of life change necessarily for what you're telling me you're going to recommend going forward and actually its execution going forward? These are big themes, and almost every single thing we heard in those community forums ended up coming under, I should say, one of those umbrellas. Okay. I actually had a big continuum. I had some people say, well, you didn't ask anything about the government. You don't like the government. I didn't ask anything about the government because whether you like the government or not, the government has to be a partner in all this. Okay? So the other thing is I asked more or less positive questions, and a lot of people gave negative answers. People want change, but they want it in a way that's shaped. And for some folks, it just means there's going to be some loss. It's unfortunate, but economic development, just like anything else, there's an opportunity cost in it. We've got to watch for that. So the community forums brought those things up as things to watch in terms of the messaging later. Exactly. Having that community unity is key. Okay. So from a core project standpoint, those were a lot of the main deliverables in terms of the recommendations going forward, but there's extras coming up. And so we want to start thinking ahead. There's some things that have happened over the last 6 months that we want to watch in terms of having a context about what's around us. One is interest rates are rising. Now, why is that important? Well, it's important because we all tend to use capital markets for a lot of different reasons. And if I'm going to take on debt, why am I taking on debt to come to you? When that cost of debt is rising, what are you telling me you're going to do for me in a rising cost environment? So we've got to watch that, and there's actually some folks out there predicting an economic slowdown sometime around 2020. How many people here went to the event in Santa Rosa a few weeks ago called the California Economy Project? Okay. You may or not have caught this, but I'm telling you this because it was in the public sphere. Betty Yee state treasurer, who writes my checks every month, said very quickly in a 5-minute interview that her staff is preparing for the downturn in 2020. Not a downturn or a possible downturn, but the downturn in 2020. Now, whether she said that off the cuff or she didn't have her data right, it's kind of immaterial. But when that kind of stuff leaks out from Sacramento, from the treasurer's office, that means they're already starting in Sacramento to think, wow, from a public finance standpoint, I got to start thinking in 2020, if we're going to see a slowdown in economic growth, we're going to start to see a slowdown in tax revenue, and on the other pieces that run Sacramento, some are predicting it. Why is it important again? You got to think, if you're going out there on an economic development strategy, what are the risks in doing that? And what do you got to see forward to be able to say, if I go this direction initially, this environment might be a little bit more interest in economic, let's say, economic growth sensitive to these other projects. And they may all be sensitive to a certain extent, but you want to keep that in mind, which ones are more sensitive to the others, and try to shape around the economic cycle. The recent fiscal policy packages coming out of Washington have some confounding effects on California. On the agricultural side, specifically on the trade side, farmers have probably a little bit more positive outlook going forward. At the same time, for Californians, we kind of got hammered in terms of the tax breaks, and it depends on where you live. For Lake County, it might be more in the middle, and y'all might have more net positive effects than, let's say, in places like San Francisco or Los Angeles. But there's a lot of confounding effects on there depending on how wealthy the community is or how agriculturally based the community is going forward. There's been growth across the board. So 2011 is basically the year in which the recession finally ended for most of California, including Lake County, and we've seen growth throughout the North Bay and Lake County ever since then. But the growth has been different in Sonoma and Napa counties than Lake and Mendocino counties. And what's been tough to watch is Lake and Mendocino County have sort of separated themselves by being a little bit more slow growth than Sonoma and Napa counties have. But it doesn't mean that Sonoma and Napa counties have grown in the correct way for those communities either. And Napa County, where I'm speaking tomorrow morning, is really at a juncture where they have to think about what they want to be 5 years from now. Because they're starting to grow up very quick in Napa County. Okay? They have water issues, traffic issues, housing price issues, wage issues. But they have a lot of cash flowing around Napa County at the same time. So we've seen growth that's a little bit different, and we're going to monitor that. Why? Because adjacent counties tell us something about where partners are and what might be coming for y'all. And the competition's gone up, and that's really, I think, the key message here about the context is that while you think that you're special here in Lake County, you are. Every other community thinks the exact same thing, and competition has gone up. And if most of the flow comes from the south-north, there's a gigantic fishing net sitting there waiting to grab all that stuff as it's coming. And you got to be thinking about how do you get them to walk right through that and come to you? Or how can you partner and have them come to both? Okay? Or a mix of those strategies. And that's key. So, I'm going to show you two graphs real quick that expand this into a forecast. That may shock you a little bit. Hopefully it doesn't. But this is something just as a working hypothesis that, will Lake County always have this dichotomy? You got about 29,000 residents that have a job, according to California EDD. But you only got about 17,000 people who actually work in Lake County. Now, it doesn't mean that all 17,000 come from the residence pool. That's not true. But in net, in terms of flows, you got more supply than demand. So these folks are going to be working some other place. Okay? So you're going to have people leaving the county, at least for right now. The beauty of that is that you can actually take some of that difference and say, wow, there's got to be an opportunity now to attract some of those folks to not commute anymore and actually work here. I wonder what skills they have. That data, or those data, are available. Okay? Part of the workforce strategy. The reason I brought up that meeting a couple weeks ago in Santa Rosa is because these data right here came out right before that meeting in a project that's a partner project between Caltrans, who's thinking about where they're going to put infrastructure over the next 40 years, and the California Economy Project. This is what they're predicting in Lake County for the next 10 years in terms of percentage growth by industry. So they're actually expecting about 13% growth of total wage and salary jobs in Lake County over the next 10 years, a little bit more than 1% per annum, where most of that's going to be in health and education. Okay? And when you look at that, what immediately pops out to you that's not there? What type of number on the number line doesn't show up?
Self-employed.
No, that's a whole different ballgame. Sorry, I didn't say that very well. It's not on. But if we think about sort of the classic job that would attract short of the self-employed, what you see, there's no negatives, right? There's no industry that's looking to contract. If you look at Sonoma County, they think that construction is actually going to contract in Sonoma County. In Napa County, they think finance and construction are going to contract. Why? Because the cost of living is going to rise faster in those places, and there's going to be a reason for those industries to move some other place, where none of that's happening here. So the good news is that you're seeing growth almost across the board except for information, which is publishing and software, and there's a lot of rural California that has zero growth there, so don't think that that's a big deal. But here's where it's a little bit more dubious. That's percentage change. This is the actual number of new jobs. Okay? So that 13% is about 2,300 more jobs, but look at how much of that gets sucked up into healthcare and education versus a lot of these other ones that have barely 100 jobs of growth over the next 10 years in that prediction. Okay? Where is the focus of this strategy? Mainly in here and a little bit here. What's cool about that is that they're predicting something from the past, which means there's got to be some opportunity if you do something a little bit different going forward. But why this is really important is because these data are actually hitting the desks in Sacramento for your elected officials in Sacramento. The point of these forecasts is this is meant to be the main forecast in policymaking now for a little while. Okay? So watch these things very closely. This just came out 3-4 weeks ago. Okay. Now, another part of this project was to try to find other communities to watch. So I gave you some metrics to follow before. And now what I want to do is I want to show you some so-called peer and aspirant places. So in terms of peer, Tehama County, Yuba County, and county in Oregon called Yamhill. Does anybody know where Yamhill County is? A little bit? Good. We looked at those as peer for 3 main reasons. One, relatively rural, somewhat close to a major suburban or urban area. Yamhill is relatively close to Portland. But the other piece is that each one of these, if you look at the way they market themselves as a place to come and live because of, guess what? Quality of life. Okay? Not too far away from the city, but far enough away to get away. How many people have thought about Lake County as not that far from the city, but far enough away to get away? It's just one of many messages you heard over time. Okay? But if you look at other data, the personal income per capita, the median household income, the wage levels, the number of employees, the population sizes, all relatively similar in all 3 of those places. As aspirant, Mono County, California, Deschutes County, Oregon, and Kootenai County in Idaho, where Coeur d'Alene is in Idaho and where Bend is in Oregon, and then Mono County. Why? Rural areas, ag and tourism stacked on top of each other, but some science happening there as well, and bringing in a much larger crowd and having proximity in such a way that they're feeding off of those pieces in another area. So Coeur d'Alene's relatively close to Spokane, Washington. Its airport, its universities, its workforce. Bend feeds off both Oregon State University and the University of Oregon a little bit in terms of science that comes in. They just put another campus in Bend. And in Mono County, which is a total left turn on that, Mono County is a relatively small place. How many people here have been to Mono County at least one time? Okay. Their strategy is twofold right now. They put the flag in the ground. They want to drive younger people to Mono County as a place to visit. Why? Because they've made infrastructure investment in broadband and actually brought chain coffee there. Okay. There's a lot of places that resist that and don't want to provide the incentives for that to happen. Mono County's done that. And they actually have an airport that accesses most of the major hubs in California as well. So that's all they're doing. They're just doing tourism, and that's about it. They've kind of stuck themselves on that strategy, but it's something to watch because that type of place is going to attract strategy some other areas of California where you're not just a one-trick pony. You have more diversity, and how can you do it right? This is the messaging you get from most of those places. Have a quick read in that for the next 20 seconds. Quality of life. Cost of doing business is lower. Quality of workers is high. And we're very engaged as a community. You can shape your own possibilities. And has anybody ever said that about Lake County at some point in your past?
Yes.
The reason I put this up here, folks, because I heard this over the last 6 months continuously. And if you look at the marketing strategies of these aspirant places and even some of the peers, they're saying the same exact stuff. Why? Because they totally believe it. They're dyed in the wool on this, and that's great. You want that out of community members. Okay? But you're not alone. That competitive aspect is key. So watching the evolution of these places can tell you competitive aspects for Lake County, but also where you might want to go. So to get these things done, there needs to be some financial investment. We talked about this already. How do you use the money? Where can you actually do TIDs or other business improvement districts? Where are you going to pay for the infrastructure? Thinking about that going forward. You also need to pick some projects right away. Broadband is something I've been hanging my hat on, potentially thinking about airport renovations. These are purely examples. They're not to-dos or must-dos, except for the broadband piece, which I'm really fixated on. But you want to get a couple things going relatively right away. I've done these projects where I leave, and then everybody kind of looks around at each other, then something happens, a recession, a fire, an earthquake, a hurricane, something happens, and then 6 or 8 months go by, and then all we're doing is regrouping. And it's the same thing all over again. If you get a couple projects going right away on these nodes, you will start walking on that path, and at least you'll have momentum going forward. So having some projects going right away is key. You might want to put, like I said earlier, a new financial district forward in the report. There's some ways to look at those financial districts and what you can do. But thinking about financing that is key going forward. And you got to think, how are we actually going to pay for it, and not necessarily come out of pocket initially on that. There are some ways of doing this in tools. Okay, we have an opportunity zone. So is there any strategy right now to go out and try to utilize that opportunity zone as we know it? Think about that. Is there something out there? And second, Colusa County is a partner in this. Can you jam those two together? Right? There are some opportunities, but it's not as easy as just saying that you can get a deferment or an elimination of the federal tax piece. Come. There's competition, but partnering is key. So go to Colusa County and find ways that you can come together. One of the things I have as a sub-strategy, if you're going to do agricultural supply chain, you partner with Colusa County, utilize I-5, and have everything moving that way. I understand that Highway 20 is not the greatest infrastructure on planet Earth, but it is a way of looking at a partnership that you otherwise may not get. So watch that closely too. Who will be your messenger? So Lake County EDC should be cast in that role if it's going to be the countywide economic development corporation. And being that messaging hub and project lead, you need someone to carry the flag. So if you're going to put together more financing for EDC or any agency, 2 questions you may want to ask right away. What are going to be the deliverables? If I write you the check, what are you going to do for me? And then second, are there some projects that you already have underway that we can jump on right now and actually move forward? And EDC put that report together in terms of block grant funding and some other things that are already cooking forward. So just thinking about what you can do, and that's low-hanging fruit just to get started. The toolbox, there's a lot of stuff out there. I've kind of already said some of this, but thinking forward, the key is having a commitment. You've got to be able to say, we're going to make this investment now, and we're going to make it in such a way that we want to see this come to fruition. What a lot of communities do, they do 1 year funding. You say, okay, we're going to test drive it. Then that 1 year goes by, and there's no results. That's because it's a long-term strategy. You may not get anything for 1 year. You may just get the process started and say, well, we're not refunding it because I didn't get any of my deliverables in. Or some political problem comes in. You have to make a countywide community commitment to whatever you do, not now, but actually probably for 3 to 5 years in a row, just to see what happens. Again, it's another gamble. Politically, you all have to figure that one out. This is one model of how to draft that funding up for whatever agency. If it is Lake County EDC, start with county funding, then maybe the city of Clear Lake, city of Lakeport. You could split it up in other communities depending on how it's financed in the unincorporated areas. You can find grant funding. You might find other agencies like EDA or USDA to come in, and then you may get some in-kind. And it's okay to get in-kind or corporate funding to come in and reduce some expenses. For example, you might find there's a PR agency in Lake County who would want to, as a piece of philanthropy, provide you with labor and resources around messaging. Because they already have global links in place. You don't have to do all that heavy lifting. So that might be part of this 20% right here, is to find a local partner. That's one of many examples. But this is one way of funding it. The level of finance, I've recommended, is a minimum of $500,000 a year, okay, for one agency. Now, think about it, oh my God, that's an amazing amount of money. That's probably 2 staff, maybe 2.5, and everything else would just be expense in terms of just driving the messaging and the attraction strategy and trying to drive business toward Lake County. That 500,000 will be gone quick. There's 3 principles I put forward as success, and I do this in all my projects. First one is to focus on what leads and not what lags. Don't sweat what's happened except as context, and you got to focus on what's coming, okay? Because that environment around you is constantly changing. The second thing is to play to your strengths and try to partner where you can. Don't do things that you're not good at. But at the same time, if you can't find a partner who can enhance you a little bit and get you where you want to be, take on those partnerships. Filter that, but take them on. Because you're going to have to do more than just one entity can. For example, classic issue. Cities don't like to partner with other cities or the county, generally speaking. Why? Because cities can sometimes be relatively parochial in the way they look at the tax revenue. Okay? Breaking down those walls is a key piece of this so-called partnership. That's intra-county. Outside, I already talked about Calusa and Lake coming together, one where the opportunity zone is, but just thinking about the very relatively similar places. Thinking about how you can partner. And the other thing is think about 5 years ahead, not 5 years ago. If you get stuck in the past, you're almost absolutely damned to repeat it at the end of the day, okay? Why you want to think 5 years from now? It's because it might take 5 years to really see the strategy come forward, okay? Infrastructure-wise, the other pieces, you're going to have to wait a little while to get some momentum. So don't get freaked out if the first year doesn't get you exactly where you want to be. Give it a little time. So that's the key. There are a lot of challenges, folks. There's a lot of issues in terms of the messaging. You need to be consistent and be one voice. So in the community forums, I heard a lot of different voices about crime, concerns over infrastructure, not the right housing, not enough hotels, too many hotels. A lot of inconsistency, and that's people drawn at random from the community who came. In the political circles and in the policy circles, everybody's going to have one voice. Like, go back to the example I just gave. Our cities and the county, one is partners. I know you all are sitting here today. But think about that going forward. Can you make those partnerships happen and be one solid voice for the county as a whole? Okay. The next is you will have to, in a sense, give up something. And you've already given up a lot. The fires and the reduction of the housing stock have meant lower property taxes. It's just one of many things. The lower flow of people, lower sales taxes, or slower sales taxes. Those things mean that you're going to have to look, where am I going to find the money to make these sort of bets? That's a challenge. There's, over the last 6 months and over the last 25 years where I've been either family-wise or otherwise associated with Lake County directly, one of the biggest things is recognizing that Lake County, though usually described as Lake County, has a bunch of different Lake counties within it. And you might want to roll the dice and say there's actually 5 different Lake counties. And each of the districts has its own differences that need to be accounted for. Well, while you may have different challenges, what that should really do is just lead to a set of challenges that everybody's facing one way or the other. Because if you're in one district, you're adjacent to one that has a different challenge, those things will fold over those borders. They're very porous. So don't get caught up in a lot of that, but it's a challenge to not see that because you can get very, very micro in the way you think. You're kind of starting from behind a little bit. Competition regionally is pretty stiff, and it's gotten more stiff since the recession. So that's okay though. It means that there's actually probably a little bit more runway here than you would have in other places, but it's a little more competitive, so there's a bit more of a challenge. And we need 1 year without fire. And I don't mean any fire, because we should assume there's going to be something. But we need one that doesn't have people running from their homes or end up on the news as that, you evacuated 25,000 people from Lakeport and its environs. We need that to not happen for 1 year. Okay? So one thing to think about is the challenge that you're seeing now in Butte County. So as Wilda said, I went to Chico State as an undergraduate, and I have a lot of ties in the Chico and Paradise area, and it's been absolutely tragic to watch what's unfolded there, and obviously y'all have been through it here too, in different magnitudes. Why is that important? Well, if you go back up here to regionally competitive and some other issues have been going on, guess what? You now have this other regional competition place for construction, home building, federal money, state money, other philanthropic money, When Santa Rosa went through its thing last year, Redwood Credit Union, I'm on the board of Redwood Credit Union, $32 million raised. What did that do to other nonprofits? It sucked some of the money away from them and moved it in another direction. But that's natural. It was an emergency situation. Same thing's happening in Butte County, and it's rearranging the way that funding's taking place. So not only is Santa Rosa and Napa have to do their own rebuilding, and that's a relatively local issue, not that far away, is going to have another pull on demand. So if you want Lake County to be rebuilt, which it still needs to in some ways be done, you now have dual competition, two geographic areas that have larger magnitude problems in some ways than y'all. So how do you convince in that now more competitive, dubious competition, but still more competitive environment to make that happen? We'll see. So let's walk through what to do the first 2 years as a conclusion. This is what I'm recommending as far as the initial path. Looking for some education grants and trying to get some lab space, whether it's lab in the classic science sense or lab just as a space that you can actually play around. A maker space that's more expansive on the education side, for example. An art space. Things that would actually become attractants, in doing business on the other side. Quasi-entrepreneurial, but something that sees either as workforce or a new business starter. And having the wireless to get it done. Thinking about hospitality. Can we do training programs in the short term? Can we change curricula to be focused on training local workers for hospitality? Hire a grant writer. There's a lot of grant writers in Lake County, but hire one with one focus, and that is to try to drive money to fund these strategies. Okay? And if you already have one, get a second one. Because if you need to look for external funding, you're going to have to get a lot more diligent about it and actually get out there and be competitive. I say identify 25 sites around the county as far as ready to occupy with targeted industries tenants, so a lot of different caveats there. 25 is just what I consider to be a relatively round number, that they need to be ready to occupy is caveat one. Second is you don't want them to be occupied by yet another retailer on the front end. You want retail to get pulled up behind your strategy. You notice that the 4 targeted industries I talked about, none of them had retail outside of visitor support, okay? Retail will get pulled behind these strategies naturally as incomes slowly rise up. So you want to think about that in terms of just to the targeted industries and nothing else. Those 2 caveats might be very tough to find 25 sites you like. The funding piece, as I said, for a minimum of 3 years, I think 5 is a more round number, but y'all got to figure that out. Who's going to be the lead and how long you're going to make the investment? And then finally, establishing these messages. So this is year 1. Right? Establishing a messaging protocol is really the more deep message here. What social media are you going to use? What classic media are you going to use? Who's going to be the messenger? Who's going to filter those messages, especially when something goes wrong? So let's say there is another relatively large fire next year. Okay? Who should be the filter of the outbound information on the business side of Lake County to say, we're still in business, it's not that big of a deal, Channel 7 News is worried because there's 40 acres on fire, they've flown a helicopter up here, it's not a big deal, you hit the Twitter button and it goes. And your messaging is consistent and reliable. It takes away the negative, oh, the whole county's on fire again, right? I mean, it's unbelievable the way that people run with stories. One of the things last year that happened is Sonoma County took a long, hard look at tourism messaging because they were very concerned that people coming from all over the world to come to Sonoma County were not going to come anymore because they thought the whole place had turned to ash. So there's this huge amount of messaging that went by. If you can stay consistent, they really tripped over their shoelaces on remaining consistent because they didn't have a plan. There was nobody designated to say, okay, get out of the fire zone, get on 3 screens and start pounding it, that we're still open for business, still open for business. They waited 3 weeks to do that, and it probably cost them 6 months as a result of it. Okay? So having that ready, contingency planning against that messaging. All that are sort of tactics underneath this. In year 2, you want to start making the contacts. When you have all those other pieces ready to go and you feel like you're actually ready to absorb a new business and start that other spin, you want to go out and look for so-called clients. Who's going to come in and be someone you want to support and watch grow here? You need to go out and get it done. Could be somebody that's side gig or somebody that's bringing the business with them. Could be somebody that just comes here because they think that Lake County is actually going to fit them for exactly the calculus they're looking at, and then attracting the correct workforce. Those messages should already built in year 1, then you actually go out and find them in year 2. You establish the metrics and make sure you report out on what happened in year 1. You want to track the visitor data and show that what you're doing on the TID side actually is working. It's actually bringing in people. So in terms of that, the new TOT, you want to say that you made the right investment. And you want to contact those universities or those scientists and say, we're now ready to take you on. I said this a little while ago. UCSB, which is nice, it's not that far away, has the top lake science program in the world. Okay? Go down there, have a meeting with them, say what you're going to do for them to bring professors who want to do sabbatical here because they have a research project that, guess what, about a lake, right? Have them come here, bring work with them, say you can actually support them with lab space because you already developed that on year one, and then everybody comes here in a virtuous cycle. And then what happens, they go away and they go to Lake County, they're ready for you, the science is there. And it happens again and again and again. And that can spin out businesses. So, the two big questions that are always there, and this is how I want to leave you. What makes you different, and what's the ROI of having a business here? How are you going to answer those questions? And do it real, and do it seriously. Like, you know, this weekend when you sit around with a glass of wine and you're talking about Lake County, ask the people you're sitting with these two questions. Why would you start a business here? Okay. What's the return on that investment, the so-called ROI? And why are we different? Really? Okay? And just say, it's quality of life, and just keep on trucking, right? Don't hang your hat on that. We've got plenty of evidence to suggest there are hundreds of communities in the western United States who've got the same exact market. Okay? You got to figure in a very niche way, what can you do? Right? Why did I not say aerospace as an attractive? Because what do you have here as an asset? The lake. In other words, don't rely on this. You know, in Healdsburg, it's funny because they'll say, "Oh yeah, well, we knew that was going to happen." They had no idea that those folks were coming from General Dynamics. Zero. Super lucky. Okay, but they built an environment in which it had a really good chance of happening. That's what y'all are going to do. But if you can't answer these two questions well, 5 years from now, you'll be saying, "Oh, I wonder what happened," because you didn't answer these two questions well. So folks, that is what we did. So as far as the process goes, we're going to have people come up to the mic, right, and ask questions, and I'll answer them as necessary. Okay, folks, thank you again, and I want to thank all the partners and your support. This is a wild project because there's a lot of different moving parts. In the summer, we had more issues, and now we have even more issues, but we have a lot of opportunity here. That is the key. Take advantage of those opportunities. Thank you.
Can we start with our electeds?
Yeah, I was just going to say, if we'd like to open it up to the elected officials in the room to make some comments, and then we'll open it up to the public for questions. Thank you. Start with the floor.
You know, one of the things that's happening in Lake County, and I would just like to put this on the table so that everybody can see this, and Dr. Eiler knows this. We're actually doing a lot of these things right now. And we're looking at the large building in Lucerne. We call it the Castle. We're looking at a partnership there. It has a lot of the pieces that we're talking about. We're looking at from the standpoint of the lake science. There's UC Davis is actually working on a project. Southern California Coastal Water Research Project is looking at coming in on a project. There's many pieces, and we would love to have University of Harvard. So there's a lot of pieces that are already working, and somewhere they're going to land. So I just want you to know that a lot of this stuff is going on. There's also a piece on hospitality that may wind up here. That is in the works. If it works, then of course it'll look like we followed this pathway perfectly. But every one of these things clearly is the right way to go. And there's other pieces, those other things, as JFK used to say, we should do those as well. The lake clearly is the focal piece, the centerpiece for the county. And if you wanted to talk about what's different in Lake County as opposed to anywhere else in North and South America, we have the oldest, most significant lake, warm water ecosystem, and the oldest, I say, by virtue of hundreds of thousands of years in both North and South America, because we are totally within a unique setting here in the intercoastal range, and it keeps that lake alive because of the plate tectonics. So at the end of the day, this is a perfect place to study, and it has been going on for years, and they can sit on top of that body of work and move lake science forward. So Dr. Eiler's hit everything on the mark, just as we expected him to. And we're looking back thinking we're not bad off. We are pretty much going in the right direction. So we hope to see this happen, like we say, just about ready to spring. Just as the economics turn down, we're going to be moving forward. Positive message all around. We're silent up here.
Right here, Jim. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Here I go. Good afternoon, everybody. Mope Simon, District 1 Supervisor. Sorry, I got a little bit of cold I'm dealing with. But yeah, I just want to thank everybody that was on the committee and everything moving forward. So really appreciate all the hard work and the vision for long-term stuff. I think from the board standpoint, coming on board as a new supervisor, looking at the long-term strategy is something that I've been preaching from day one. We had plenty of time with Carol Hutchinson when I first went to the first CSAC training of looking at the long-term vision for Lake County. And I'm glad to say the 2028 revisiting strategy is something that is right in line with this report. I think we are moving in the direction to really change things here in Lake County. I think from a board standpoint, I think it's personally responsible when projects or things in my district or across the county are coming in, that we look at it in a positive light and we start to make decisions as a full board to really show the businesses that are looking at Lake County as opportunity, that we're willing as a board to step forward for our communities and make decisions in a positive manner. And I think that's where we really come in as the role players in this vision moving forward. I appreciate everybody's hard work, but I really like the theme of looking 5 years ahead, not 5 years behind. We've done a great job, like I've said from year one, setting up the agricultural industry here, the wineries, everything that come along with that. But we've also made some recent decisions where we could add food venues in there, but it also carries on to how do we keep those folks here with the agritourism. The hotel situation is in this report very clearly that we need to be able to develop that. We need to create the staff here locally through our colleges and other things as we move forward with that industry. And I think we're right on path. So I appreciate the path you've given us. You know, coming from the travel side, you're always on a path and a vision to make your community better. And this is a great one right here. And as long as we start walking the walk and making the decisions as a board, we are definitely going to change this over the next 2 decades and how this county is perceived throughout the state of California. It's also important from our point of view from the board to be making those relationships. There's a new governor going to be taking over in this office. We need to make sure that they understand the focus that we have here to take care of our community members and to bring the light on one of the poorest counties in the past as we've been, but coming into the future of how we're going to work our way out of that and what we're going to do strategically and business-minded to make sure that we take care of those things. So I think relationships at the state of California, at the Capitol, are going to be very important in this vision to make sure that they know we're working our way out of this. We don't want a handout. We want a hand up and a partnership so we can keep moving things forward for the positively for everybody here in this county. So thank you very much for being here today. Always open to talk about projects myself. If I haven't talked to you about a project or mentioned something, you know, it's always something on my mind. I made a point, 2 weeks ago at our board meeting, we talked about new industries. I know cannabis is a new industry. As you said, it's very volatile. It's going to change over the years. But if you're going to encourage an industry, you need to make sure that you have all parts so we don't get the leakage like Robert talked about here and those types of things. But that goes for all industries that may be coming in here. I think something new that I had never known about in my district, you have the glamping project that Six Sigma has stepped up and done. I think it's phenomenal for our area and that opportunity. But it's that outside of the box thinking that is really going to get us to be a shining star in Northern California. So that's what I have to say. Thank you for being here today, coming out as a community, coming together, and really working on this strategy. So thank you very much, everyone.
Well, I have the mic. I'll take a minute. This is great to have somebody come and tell us all the things we need to hear. The biggest thing we need to do over the next 5 years is take advantage of it. This has happened in the past, and we haven't taken advantage of what we were told then, not as completely as we should have. We need to take something like this and run with it. We have great possibilities in Lake County. We just have to let everybody know, and the message should go all out there, that we all believe the same thing. And that's why both cities in the county need to get together and do one message. Because there's been so many messages over the years that just have gotten out there and it's been harmful to Lake County. So something that I've preached at the board for ever since I've been on the board and on the city council, I was on the city council 20 years ago, is when you invite people over, what's the first thing you do around home? Clean the house, make sure everything looks good. We need to do that in the entire Lake County. When we invite people up, we want them to come in, we want them to see a beautiful area, and to me, that's one of the most important things we can possibly do. We need to clean up Lake County. The person, I don't remember his name, that we had years ago that came up and did some economic development for us. Roger Brooks came to Lake County and said, this should be called Blue Tarp County, because that's all he saw. That was his first impressions. So we need to get those first impressions to where they come in and go, what a beautiful place. There's so many things to do, and we can do that real easily. And the other thing we've done is we've turned businesses down in the past. The city of Clear Lake went through a huge deal a number of years ago. There should be a brand new shopping facility at the old airport property right now. That was pretty much shot down, not by the city, but by outside folks that made a big deal out of it. And we need to encourage business, and we're building beautiful roads in Santa Rosa, Ukiah, because of the sales tax dollars we're spending over there. We need those businesses here, so the sales tax dollars stay here. Thank you.
The only thing I would like to add is I like the whole having one message, that all the cities, the county having a message, a positive message. And I think that's one thing that we need to work on as a county, is having a positive message about ourselves. Because I think we do a lot of damage to ourselves when we continue to talk negative about Lake County. Because I know for myself, when I moved here, that's all I had heard about Lake County is all the negative. I didn't hear anything positive. So that's something we need to work as a community, is pushing that positive message about who we are, because we are an amazing place. We just need to continue to see that and let people know about it.
Rob? I see how it is.
We'll bring it back to Lakeport in a second.
I'm gonna need his help for the next 2 years. Yeah, sorry.
So I'm looking around the room. My name is Bruno Sabatier, Mayor of Clear Lake. I'm looking around the room and I see people who have abilities to participate in everything that we've looked at here and everything that we're all already involved in. This builds hope. This builds a track that we can follow so we can get to where we want to be. And something I'm still trying to learn is the patience behind it, because nothing can happen overnight. Next year, we're not going to see this come to fruition. But we need to stay positive and we need to stay diligent to keep on the same mission we've decided to start on. And we need to make sure to communicate that with everyone we know, because those who are not in the room do not understand possibly the amount of time it's going to take for us to get there. And we need to make sure people want to continue to support the mission that we've decided to take on, because it is going to take a while. People are going to ask questions, why are things not changing? I see this all the time in Clear Lake. I feel we're changing a lot in Clear Lake, but we're not. It was just told to us, we're starting from behind. We know this. And so when we're starting from behind, it's going to take a little bit more time for us to get our ducks in a row in order to get to the conclusion we're looking for. And I think that's what we really need to always be diligent about, is staying positive about the mission we're on and always working towards communicating with everyone we know. The more the word is out there, the more the knowledge is out there, the more people will want to support what it is that we're doing and understand what it is that we're doing. Because I think a lot of it is so not in the back rooms, but it's so behind the radar that that most people don't understand or see it. And I think that's our job, every single one of us in the room, not just those that are elected officials, to make sure and let everybody know what it is that we're doing and what the timelines are and when things should happen. I'm part of the marketing committee for the City of Clear Lake, Joyce Overton as well. And this is something we've been trying to work on, and I think we're going to bring this right back to our marketing committee and figure out how it is that, what have we been doing and where does it fit into these pieces, and then what can we change to better market ourselves and better promote ourselves for exactly the same reasons that were written up there. So I think there's a lot of things that we can take from this to bring to our own nonprofits, our businesses, and our agencies, and then also the collaborative piece. That's probably one of the most important pieces, is how do we work together so we're not still working in silos, so we can make sure that we all move together as one. So thank you very much for this report. I really appreciate it. And we skipped Joyce off with that.
Dr. Eiler, thank you very much for that report. It's, I can't say I've read it page by page by page, but I've been through it time pretty well, and you've hit on some of the most important points. That obviously we need to sell our quality of life here, and we need to be positive. We always need to be getting the positive message out. That's something that I think is, I see in Clear Lake already. We've started to really start to clean our city up. We're improving our roads. We're doing all of those things that we need to do to bring business in. You call Clear Lake an opportunity zone. We have, as Jeff's talking about, we had the old airport project. It's still there. We're starting to heat that up again and push that. We need to keep that going, and I think that fits right into that strategy that you have. Along with that, our tourism industry. We have all these natural resources. We have this huge body of water right in the middle of our county. All of our cities, or 2 cities, all of our communities around the lake need to really, I believe, push that and welcome people in to get that tourism back for the lake. And our ag tourism, close to my heart, I think is a great opportunity to expand the tourism industry in Lake County. That's probably what
Nick Bennett from Clear Lake. I applaud what's presented here today. I grew up in Lake County in the 1950s. We're never going back to there. And we don't need to, because that was a different time, a different era. We do need to look forward. Everything needs to look forward. And it needs to be a collaboration between the county and the cities and the communities. You know, I have a home down, and we talk about, Jeff brought up, or somebody about splitting the blue tar area and cleaning up our county. My wife's from Jalisco in Mexico, and I have a nephew down there who said the biggest problem with Mexico is nobody cares. When they finish eating something, it just goes on the ground. It's trashed, and you know we live in it's not an expat community. I'm able to go around for miles, but that's the attitude many people here have, and we need to clean that up. We need to change that attitude, bring in collaboration between all of our governments and all of our community to move forward and look forward, not behind. And you learn, you know, even at my age, you learn something new every day. And that's what we need to get out to this, to our whole county, and have them move it forward with us.
I just want to leave you with a question before we move it on. I've been hearing about the potential recession coming up. You called it the recession. Not much of a potential there in that wording. Before, it was the housing market that kind of led to a bunch of other, that was the domino effect starting from there. What can we do to prepare ourselves? What does your crystal ball say will be something that maybe we can make changes today to have less of a hurt coming in the future? Because we are still coming out of the recession here in Lake County. Rather than have overcome the downturn, we just haven't hit that level that we were at. And so if there's anything we can do to prepare ourselves to less be hurt by this upcoming recession, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Sure. So in quick order, if you follow this path, the one thing about it is you'll find ways of shaping around it. Meaning, for one, if the urban areas of California are the place where you can see the center of the downturn, there will be some flight away of people and businesses. Don't think Facebook or Google or Amazon are going to move here, but there are thousands of smaller businesses and hundreds of thousands of people who want to now leave the urban area because 10 years have gone by and try to find a different quality of life, but potentially still utilize those networks globally in a place that they can do that. Those opportunities will happen as the recession, I shouldn't say the recession, because just a sidebar, that was one person saying it. There are no other predictions of recession before 2020 that I've seen yet, but assuming that one is coming, because one will, the way you do it is you look for opportunities where you think the most flight or the most obvious low-cost strategy is for that entity to decide on coming to you. So while you're doing your thing, you can look at those opportunities and try to jam the two together and shape around the recession rather than just get hit by it. But a lot of communities struggle with that. If you don't get that path laid down, you won't be ready for those opportunities when they arrive.
So I want to thank you and thank everybody for coming. A really short thing is people need to look at what Clear Lake has been doing. I've sat on the council and going into my 15th year here. And what I've seen is if you think positive, you will have positive. In the past, everything was so argumentative and the councils weren't consistent. We weren't talking to counties, we weren't talking to cities. We were all, we were the low end, they were the high end. It was a big controversial thing here. Now that we've all come together, in just a matter of years, we've been so successful. So it really is that you have to be positive. Everything about our city is positive. There's no negative out there anymore. And we see it in our community. The change with our council and our administration has changed our community. Everybody in this room probably lives in different areas. You can be part of that change. Don't take negativity. When somebody comes up to me and starts saying anything bad, it's like if you don't have a solution, then you're part of the problem. Those are the people that either, we don't mind leaving, go ahead and leave. If you're going to move, those are the people that need to move. But I've seen the positive change in Clear Lake because of the positive of the leadership. And that's where it starts. You guys are our leaders. Obviously, you're here. Be the leader in every community that you live in.
Let me ask one question. Anybody in here in boots on the ground, retail business, raise your hand. That's what I thought. I'm going to tell you right now, the thing that concerns me the most in small retail businesses, and I'm worried about what's going to happen to small town Lake County, because we've had a 37.5% increase in the minimum wage. And I know in San Francisco and San Jose that making $8, $9, $10, $11 an hour is absolutely impossible to sustain. You can't live there. We are in a completely different area. As you pointed out, we have completely different issues. What I'm concerned about, and we've seen revolving doors, businesses coming and going, I haven't had a raise since 2004 because I've been raising my employees. And in my experience, I've been in Lake County since 1970. We had 65,000 people here. We still have about 65,000 people here. The growth is growing, and business is not necessarily growing. We lost 1,100 homes up in Cobb Mountain. My business went down 15% at Lakeview Market in the meat department because I lost all these customers. They're gone. Okay, so what I'm worried about is 37.5% increase in minimum wage at a lot of the businesses in Lake County, and it's going up again. I'm worried about short term, but we're talking right now, my wife and I are already working 7 days a week to stay in business. We're not for our catering business, we'd already be gone. Grocery retail profits in 2016, 1.1%. 1 cent out of every dollar is what they make at the grocery stores. Little stores make even less. We have about $500,000 worth of excess supply in grocery, and we're still putting in more Dollar Generals and other stores, which is fine. But the problem is the sustainability. And then we want to increase service and hospitality. My question is, I'm cutting my payroll by $1,000, which is about 2 full-time people. How do you maintain service levels? Service is already bad in most places. Lake County's got service issues. Number one, in 50 years, never seen a more disengaged, uncaring, cavalier group of employees in history. They are so entitled. They no show, no come, no go, no phone, no show. It happens all the time. We are facing a serious issue with the absolute demolition of downtown America. And if you're thinking about talking about, come to our local shops and restaurants. In 5 years, they may not be there. You even said businesses we have now will be or may be gone. I think small town Lake County is in serious jeopardy because minimum wage needs to go up in the city, fine. You can't pay people, they have to drive in from 90 minutes away, on average in San Jose, to work there. That's the reality. You need to make $220,000 to buy a home there. We have all these benefits, but we've got some serious challenges. Small businesses are on their way out because minimum wage is killing the rural areas. We can't afford it, and we're paying people that are virtually, on average, incompetent. And the people that are making good money are already gone. That 11,000 people that are here, that live here, are going somewhere else because they get more money already. So I'm worried about that. How do we maintain levels of service when we can't keep the number of people that we have now because we're going broke? That's my question.
Yeah.
I want to thank you, Dr. Eiler, for compiling so much community input and for using your expertise to synthesize the data that you're now putting before us today. What I'm really looking forward to is the question and answer period, because as I look through this room, I see people who are invested in almost every sector of what keeps Lake County running. And so I'm really glad that us electeds hadn't totally encroached on the question and answer period time, because I think that we've got some really good stuff. It's a unique opportunity to have this great a representation of Lake County all in one room. Thank you.
George Burr, City Council. I'm assuming you'll answer Kenny's question later.
I can answer it right now if you want.
Go ahead.
So the two basic answers to your question is it's exacerbated by the fact we have a tight labor market on top of it. So not only are you going to struggle in let's say small town America, but specifically small town California, finding workers because basically they've already been cherry picked other places, but that the increase in the wage is being forced on you, where it's not thinking more differential, is something that you're saying, well, even if I try to pay you more, I still might not be able to find the right worker and get the productivity out of that worker because of the tight labor market. There is maybe some relief if we do see a little bit of a downturn. You'll get some better workers coming who will want the wage because it won't be another choice. But that tension's always going to be there. It's unfortunately it's context that's probably not leaving anytime soon. So there's not a great solution to that problem.
But I agree with Kenny. Paying bad employees more money does not make a better employee.
Correct.
But you're wrong when you say it's going to bring more people.
No, I'm not saying that's what I said. I'm sorry if I misspoke. The idea is that in a tight labor market, you won't find, even if you tried to pay more, you won't necessarily find the talent for that wage because it doesn't exist. I'm sorry, I didn't say it very well.
No,
the flip side of it is you might have to wait, and even then it's not necessarily a cure-all. It's a tough one.
Another thing that I'd like to add, because I'm self-employed, but self-employed.
And then you can be heard, Ron.
So the other part of that I'd like to add to Kenny's is, we talked earlier about self-employed.
Yep.
Most of Lake County's business are owned by small business owners. That we can compete against each other. We can't compete against the government.
Yep.
At least Kenny, he's dealing with minimum wage issues and other government regulation. But in my business, I don't know of any other business where the state legislature is actually doing away with your business by legislation. So we can't compete against the government. That's our problem.
Yeah, what you can do is you can say no. So what you can say is you can have an attractive business come to you.
Thought of that.
Yeah, well, you're an elected, so there you go, right? So you can have a business come to you and say, I'm going to do all this stuff for you, right? And then you can actually say no to it because you want to protect smaller businesses that are already here.
That's not my point, and I don't need the microphone.
Go ahead.
You're familiar with SB 10? It does away with the bail bond industry.
Oh, yes,
I'm
yes.
a bail bond.
Right.
That's what I'm talking about.
I'm sorry, gotcha, yeah.
So I'm trying to compete with an ignorant legislature.
Yeah, what you can't fight, agreed. But what you can do is locally, you can make decisions that don't necessarily put specific types of small businesses at risk because there's a larger business that's coming in to wipe out that competition.
Right.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to misunderstand you.
Basically, on a positive note, we do have an AB 707 that's going to help clean up the lakes supposedly. And so that's going to give us better tourism, and if we can get that message out that we have our government behind us to clean up our lakes so that we have better tourism, that would be part of a good message for us. And the other thing that I thought was interesting in your speech here, was bring in scientific. Well, we have dark skies. Let's bring in some people for the dark skies. Let's train these people in the Mendocino College for things that we do have that will bring in people. So that's a good positive note. So that's on a positive side. I try to live on the positive side.
You don't like Tony's doom and gloom?
He's my yin.
I'm living it, okay? I'm living it.
He's my yin to my yang.
I'm Stacy Matino of Lake Park City Council, and I want to thank the Lake County EDC for bringing this all together, because one thing that stands out to me is that I can't remember ever doing a joint meeting with all of us in many, many years, and bringing all of us together, all of you. There's so many talented people in the community. We're just so much more effective when we all come together. So I look at this as a new beginning, that we can forget about the blue tarps and just look to the future.
Tim Lawrence, Lakeport City Council. I'm not going to say a whole lot because I want to hear what you have to say, but I really love the idea of all of us working together to bring up Lake County as one entity instead of it being us versus them. I think we're going to get so much further when we put everything in the hat together. So I really look forward to what this is going to become.
So at this time, we'd like to open it up to the public for question and answer. We'd like to designate, because we will stop hard at 11 a.m., about 3 minutes for each question and comment. So if you have a question or comment, please raise your hand and we'll start over here with this gentleman.
Good morning. I wanted to thank you again for your excellent presentation. There is one, I think, significant puzzle piece. Maybe I wasn't paying attention, or maybe it wasn't addressed, but when you do bring a new business or new businesses into Lake County, what is the response on the part of the county when you come in? And I'm not asking this question in a vacuum. We've got two businesses we're trying to bring in right now, $1 million plus, fire rehab, creating employment and everything. And again, I have a little bit of experience. I was a planning commissioner for a number of years. I was really shocked and dumbfounded as to the barriers that are being put up. And I wonder if you had any recommendations about the way the county addresses people that want to come in and want to help. Streamlining the process, appointing an ombudsman, whatever you think would be appropriate. Thank you.
I said this a little bit, and how the actual tactics of this strategy come out are going to be up to you politically, and there's no one fix that is going to fit, but you could do it where you say that for the targeted industries, we're going to streamline what you need. We're going to take those 25 sites and we're going to put them over here, and we're just going to set them up and ready to go. So if you want to come in, here's the path and here's the promised timeline to get it done, and everybody agrees that those 25 sites are going to have that timeline. And then that spins a story after that you actually executed on that timeline, and that's another attractant to come in. But you're right, you're very handcuffed as a municipality. You don't have a lot of tools in the toolbox. So you got to think politically, what are you willing to give up? If there are if there is some funding you're willing to put forward on that, specifically in making investments in infrastructure to get 25 or more sites ready to go, that's one way you can do it. But you're all going to have to wrangle with how to spend the money on the other side. There's no easy fix. There's no one tool you can go to and say, this is the one way to do it. It's tough. But there are some small things, like for example, committing to a permitting process or committing to costs for the developer or for the new business that you actually execute on again and again and again to provide a positive story about doing business here that they'll reflect on, not you're reflecting on. That's another key piece.
Hi, I'm John Jensen from Lake County News. Been covering local news independently for more than a decade. And I know that there are binders in county building of economic plans, economic strategies, much like this one, that have been surfacing over the decades and left to collect dust. So I'm curious, aside from making sure that you get paid, where's the commitment to follow through? Anybody?
Well, you can't commit to what you don't know what it's going to cost. I mean, you can't just write a blank check. That's what we're here to find out. If that's what you're looking for, I don't know. Well, I mean, John, I'm not disagreeing with you because, just like Jeff said, we have this shelf help book that has already been written, and that we didn't do anything with, and a lot of it has to do with we don't have the money. We talk about grants and grant writers, yet we don't have the 25% match to get the grant to begin with. So that causes us issues. So it's greater than that, and I'm not disagreeing with you, but that's what it always boils down to with us is where's the money going to come from? So, you know, we have employees who would also like to get paid.
Chris?
I think an answer to that question, I'm not from Lake County. I moved here 2007 after getting out of the military and started with a nonprofit organization helping veterans get into housing. And I've run into a lot of dead ends, a lot of roads that haven't happened. Since I came here, I'm now the president of the United Veterans Council, and I've run into so many no's, so many people telling me you can't do this, you can't do that. So to answer that question from them, it has to start with us. It has to start with the people in the room that are bringing solutions and bringing things to the council to say, this is what we're going to do. And when they say no, okay, how do we do it a different way? And it's not their responsibility to tell us how to do it. It's our responsibility to bring them things that they can take forward.
Yes.
That's not what he said.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's what, from the veterans community, that's what's pushed us to do better, is we're constantly getting the no's. I mean, I know that the Board of Supervisors in the City of Clear Lake had an 18-acre parcel that the state has said we don't have enough to support it. So we're doing other things to bring it back to them. And they're going to do their best to support us, but we, again, have to bring it to them. So I don't know, I know the commitment's there, but they're not going to do anything without us bringing stuff to them.
Hi, John Tompkins. I'm a trustee of the college, and I guess my question would be, what role can the college play in this role? And I would like to mention Steve here, who works with the college, and they're working on programs that can be helpful to this, what we're looking at today.
Thanks, John. So I'm Steve Hickson. I've had the pleasure of working with many of you in this room in the past, and I'm currently a business professor for Mendocino College, the Mendocino Lake Community College District. And I have a couple of positive things going, and this will help to, at least in a small way, address Mr. Parlett's concern. We've increased our customer service curriculum. We're offering a 3-unit customer service class at our Lake Center campus here in Lakeport this spring. So starting next month, you can enroll students in that. And the good news is probably 20% of the curriculum is about work ethic. Show up 5 minutes early, leave 5 minutes late, stay off your phone, and work for 8 hours. You wouldn't think you'd have to teach that, right? But we do. And we are also in the curriculum development phase for a hospitality and tourism course as well. So a couple of things going there. And we also do customer service training through our continuing education department. And workforce development is really one of our key missions with the college. And so I'd encourage any of you to reach out to me, and I can get you in touch with the people that can help you with those types of objectives. And we're very proud to be part of Lake County. I also had the pleasure of serving as the administrator of our campus here for 3 years. So Lake County is really an undervalued gem in a lot of ways, and I think there's a lot of positive things in the future. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Judy Stelgis. I'm a native of Santa Rosa. I moved with my husband to several other states, mostly in the Midwest. When my husband died, I chose to return to California, and Lake County was about the only place I could buy my way into. In coming here, I worked for a short period of time for the planning department. Initially, I had been hired with the idea that I would be able to continue work that I did in another state as a zoning official. I would enforce the zoning codes. I really would like to see that happen in Lake County, not just marijuana growing, but actually the blue tarps, which should be against zoning regulations. I don't know if they are. The current county codes are difficult to find a straight path through them. They're kind of scattered, some of them's here, some of it's there, and then a contradiction over here overrides that that's over there. So they're very difficult to follow. It would be great if the codes could be kind of aligned so that a person could read and understand them. But getting back to a zoning code official, if that could happen, I think, number one, the authority that I had back in, if this was in Kansas, the authority I had was to issue a citation if the property didn't come within compliance after a specified period of time. The weight of it would be the same as a traffic ticket. So it's not like big, heavy jail time, but it's just, it gets people's attention. Number one, people know that their property's being looked at, which pretty much in Lake County, the general idea is go there, you can do anything, nobody's watching. So a zoning official that is looking at properties, residential as well as farming and commercial properties, puts that oversight mentality, hopefully removes some of the apathy about, well, it doesn't matter because nobody's doing anything. Just to have that oversight, I don't want to say threat, but that awareness that there is oversight throughout the population, I think would help a lot, because yes, this county is pretty well known as kind of a garbage dump. I don't like living in a place that has that reputation. I'd really like to see that changed, and I'd like to be instrumental in doing that in one way or another. I currently volunteer at the Senior Center. I'm a member of the Kelseyville Business Association. I work with the Taylor Observatory. These are all interests of mine, but I really like the zoning aspect.
Andy, could I do some math here?
Yes.
It's 10:47, so who wants to do the math on that? 13 divided by 3. 6-ish?
We have time for about 4 more, including this gentleman here, John. So,
hi, I'm John Carlisi. One of the big barriers in Lake County is transportation. And while development costs here are much more reasonable than other counties in the state, transportation, which is an ongoing cost for business, is a major problem. Would you recommend that as we approach businesses, we go for businesses that are less transportation dependent?
It's a great question. So I think,
As opposed to the other question?
totally. So in terms of the agriculture, if you do pursue folks or businesses who are on the agricultural supply chain, you probably want to locate them closer to where they could actually take advantage of logistics and not stick them centrally where they'd have to drive a long way out to get anywhere else. So there's that in terms of planning where you want to put types of businesses that may be more transportation dependent than others. But at the same time, even if you don't pursue transportation dependent businesses, if your intention is to move people around the county for multiple reasons, or even just to have ingress and egress in terms of coming from other places for business, not just visiting, but having to go out to do business, the transportation infrastructure is something you're going to have to make an investment in at some point. How you do it and when you do it, in the ways you do it, you guys will have to figure out politically. We've heard a lot about the money having to move around to a lot of different things. Those are the things that we can't answer right away because there's still a lot of community discussions that are necessary. But the more that you can put those businesses closer to major transportation points and don't stick them geographically in the middle of the county, you'll probably be better off, on the margin at least. But don't push them away, especially if they're in the targeted piece.
Hi, I moved here to Lake County originally from the Midwest, and I'm a retired mental health professional. And I just want to make a comment, and then it may lead to a question, but I've been listening closely. I used to work with traumatized veterans, by the way, so I appreciated their veterans standing up and speaking. Here's my comment, just from observation. I'm going to just start with this idea that we've gone through so much change in the last century, and social science is a part of that. I don't know what the future of social science is going to be, but I'm not sure it's going to, how active or visible it is as part of the future for physical sciences. Because in the physical sciences, and you're talking about lake bed science, which is wonderful, and great, and universities, great. They bring in such good expertise. But you must be aware that there are changes happening. My sense of it, being retired, I'm not in the gist of it right now, at the cutting edge of it, but my sense of it is that from the physics that's taken place, we've seen a real radical change into algorithm thinking. That has an impact on everyone in this room. If you think of it this way, from a social scientist's point of view, the impact it has on you is that empiricism, which came out of the 1700s, is not really seen as relevant. So now you are experiencing a screen, and you're getting information, and that's called knowledge. But what you may be missing is the empiricism from the 1700s. Now what's that? Empiricism. Empiricism is your senses: sight, sound, taste, touch, smell. And you have instincts. One of the things you have an instinct for is, let's say, sights and sounds and smells. Now what's happening is the empiricism of the 1700s and earlier is not really keeping up with the algorithmic thinking of the 21st century. This is a gap that we're not even dealing with. So you're going to see a split happening between physical science and social science. Now, you could be called a socialist, communist, and I don't know how far that's going to get you. And I'm not a communist, but I am a social scientist by training. So I'm offering you this information because you have, historically, to think about this. If you leave behind the empiricism, you're going to lose the sense of what you have hospitality, but you have this other word. In social scientists, you call it resilience. And if you don't integrate resilience, I'm running out of time. If you don't, my warning is, if you don't integrate resilience, and you just do a hospitality, you're going to lose something called learning. And you have to learn from your history, and you've got 10,000-year history of social beings in the North American continent within 50 miles that are still alive. It's unlike anywhere in the continent. Don't forget that.
Thank you.
Morning. I have a quick question, and don't want to be insensitive to what happened to the fire victims in Paradise. But I'm wondering, Dr. Eiler, is there opportunity for Lake County to capture perhaps some new residents? Or I'm sure there are a lot of people that lost their businesses. Is it putting the cart before the horse, or are we ready? Or could we put out a message to welcome people to Lake County and to see if there's a way we could generate some new businesses that way as well?
Yeah, there's two ways that come off the top of my head. The first one is if you feel like you're ready to take on new residents and you have places that they want to come in as new residents, certainly getting out there and saying that this keeps you relatively close to where you know, maybe relatively similar setting. We're welcome, we have open arms for you. The second is actually as Butte County figures out what it's going to do, and some of it will be rebuilt, some of it absolutely will not be, and that's one of the biggest questions going forward. In Santa Rosa, and even here, I think a lot of people foresee continuous sort of slow rebuilding momentum. In Paradise, by the nature of the destruction up there, there's a lot of public policy questioning about whether or not they're going to rebuild at all. But if they do start to rebuild and see that momentum, Lake County can become a logistics point for movement of people and or materials toward there, where they may not be able to support it as easy because they have to, figure out where they're going to do the space given what's been lost. So there's some of that. You could also be a place for temporary workers that would come in shifts and go up. There's some ways you could partner. Again, reaching out and trying to figure out ways of doing that actually lifts all boats is certainly something to do in this current time. How long lasting that is will depend on how they react. And that's still, no data can provide conclusions as of yet.
Our last comment here.
Oh, yes.
Good morning, and I just want to thank everyone for showing the interest to come out today on such a cold day, and I really would like to thank the Workforce Alliance, the County of Lake, and the Lake County EDC for all their effort in yet another, as someone mentioned, another economic report. The encouraging thing today is that whenever I first came here into Lake County 3 years ago, it was because of disaster. And it was not on my to-do list. And I wasn't even sure that I would be able to accomplish what I did accomplish and that I would even want to stay here. It's been 3 years, and I made a conscious choice to move to Clear Lake. And since that time, it's been just a little bit, maybe a year, I just want to say how much I appreciate their leadership for being positive with a very delicate and very challenging situation. And I have heard all these voices speaking here today, and they all have a very relevant, from the heart, and from experience, the frustrations and the despair. And I want to say that, if you follow what happens in the economy around the world, the country of Greece went through a period of severe austerity. They're continuing to struggle with. I heard this gentleman over here who talks about cutting his workforce by 2. I hear about this education initiative that's going on in the local college. And I just want to say that you all have the tools that you need right now to come to the table with a coalition where you target those who need to be at the table, representing all the different segments of your population here. I see a lot that is not represented here today. I know that there's initiatives that are happening right now at the grassroots level, entrepreneurial opportunities that people are not waiting for the economy to look a certain way. They're not waiting for the county to do a certain thing. They're not waiting, for the makeup and the dress up or whatever. They are out there in the dirt, doing it the hard way, taking baby steps. And I think, we've listened to all of our concerns and the different things that we could target. But I think if you take the economic development people, you put them with the education, the local unified school districts. I'm new somewhat to California and the way things are structured here, but what I've picked up is that if you want to increase your retail customer service or your hospitality customer service, that can be seriously disappointing. Lake County does represent all the best that can be, that has been. I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. But you've got right here the Workforce Alliance and the Economic Development Corporation. And if the County of Lake can come together without dictating, and I'm not saying that they do, I'm just saying that to trust the people that you have represented, not just here, but the ones who are already doing something, and allow them at the table. That has nothing to do with county government, but coming together and doing the hard things, not waiting for the government to tell you what to do. You've all got it in progress, and there are more in this community, some who are in their own disaster response rehabilitation. So thank you, Dr. Eiler, for the way that you've pulled this together in language that can be understood by every community member out there. And I encourage the retail stuff. Let's not be complacent with where we are, and pull together and listen to what others are suggesting and look at how you can trust them to take their projects forward and support them. Thank you.
Thank you. Just briefly, we're going to wrap up here. Supervisor Steele.
Okay, well, I want to thank everyone as well, we're...
Just briefly,
All right. I'm sorry, I'm not sure where it is, but Rob always points it out for me. I want to thank everyone for what they've done to pull this together, and certainly Dr. Ryder for the way that he's pulled this together. It's just been absolutely amazing. And what has happened here is we've characterized ourselves for what we are. This is the identity of Lake County. We're a tremendously diverse place. From north to south, if you don't find it on the North Shore, you can find it in the South County, you can find it in the cities, you can find it in any small town, is a different place, and that is an advantage. You can go to Cobb Mountain, and you can go to Snow Mountain, and you will see complete differences, and the fires have actually produced a mosaic of landscape that has changed that as well, and is coming back with a renewal. We can actually look forward to a renewal and Lake County model for the entire state. And I've heard that, actually, I just returned from San Diego to the California State Association of Counties, and Lake County actually has a lot of advantages that other counties don't have because of the meeting that we're having today, where we can pull all these ideas and everybody together and move forward as one, and with the fact behind us that we are all different, and that's the strength. So with that, we are at 11 o'clock, and we appreciate everybody being here, and so this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.